Hi, and welcome to this live reading from the Befallen by Cambria Williams. And this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. In Moan, Village of Dagle, Sloane. Sloane squinted against the first traces of dawn's light, scarcely able to believe today had finally come. She and her father stood outside the family's small hovel in this tiny village of Moan, a place that, according to what father said, wasn't even on some maps of Dagle. Sloane had never seen a map of their island country, but had heard many tales of its scattered, diverse landscapes. The only place Sloane had been besides Moan, whose only fortification from the outside world was that of makeshift yet permanent wooden poles, was Asana, a village that could almost be called a town, at least to Sloane's imagination. Its outer wall was constructed from rock. Not that defensive walls were much used nowadays in Dagle. They couldn't stop the Befallen. It did not work like that. I'm still not certain this is a good idea, father said as he put the last two items in the satchel, leather belts commissioned by the elder of the village of Asana for their night watch. There was still plenty of room in the satchel in which more items could be packed, but Sloane said nothing to father. He thought he was helping her by not filling it. You speak like I've never walked to Asana before. It's not that far. I know, father tugged at his left ear as he tended to do when making decisions. But I've always been with you, and you didn't have to carry so much. I'll be fine, and you're needed here to help prepare the village for tomorrow. Sloane gave an exaggerated smile. He scratched his chin, but Sloane knew the decision was made, hence the half-full satchel. So she waited, allowing him to believe she didn't already know she would go to Asana's market day alone to sell their leatherwork. Besides, Sloane dared, I'm a much better barterer than you. You cheeky girl, father laughed. You most certainly are not. I am. And to prove it, I'll come back with a surprise. Now, Sloane, and coin left over. She crossed her arms in front of her nearly flat chest for good measure. 'Tis a bit late in the summer to spend coin we should save. What kind of surprise? Something for Sherrick? Sloane said. Father would have more difficulty saying nay to that idea. She'd been wanting to surprise her little brother for moons. As if sensing he were being spoken of, Sherrick came out of the family's hovel, rubbing his sleepy eyes. Can I come with you, Sloane? The little boy yawned as he scratched his mess of curly hair. Nay, little brother, but if you're very good and help father get ready for the prodigal moon celebration. Celebration? Sherrick made a sour face. How is starving for a whole day a celebration? Sherrick, father knelt so he was eye level with the child. Fasting is only part of tomorrow's celebration. We have much to be grateful for. Even if we are half starved most of the time, thought the part of Sloane who was looking forward to her complimentary meal from Nagel, Asana's pub owner. And don't forget about the Befallen, added the other part of Sloane, who was anxious to be back in Moan before nightfall. That terror is nothing to be grateful for. Don't even think about the Befallen. She couldn't let fear overcome her. She was going to Asana alone. Finally, trusted to go alone. It had only taken her almost 18 years to do what Joa had done at age 12. Joa. Best not to think of her older brother either. Besides, next moon at the Harvest Moon Festival, we shall feast and dance and sing to our heart's content. Father finished his speech. You can't sing, Sherrick laughed. Stars help me, two cheeky children, Father exclaimed as Ma came out of the hovel carrying a small potato muffin on her kerchief. The warm scent which had awakened Sloane before dawn made her salivate. This will have to last you, Ma said, wrapping the small muffin and handing it to Sloane. Don't worry, Ma, she said, enjoying the warmth in her palm against the crispness of the early morning air. How would she make it to mid-morning without eating it? Her parents shared a glance that Sloane knew all too well. She better start off before they changed their minds. Besides, she'd have to rest at least twice before completing the half-day's walk, and she needed to be in Asana Square by midday. I need to go, Father, Sloane said, rebalancing herself onto her good leg. Remember to get the boar and be aware of your surroundings, Ma said, tucking a loose strand of Sloane's brown hair behind her ear. I will. A second silent exchange was shared between her parents as Sloane lifted the satchel. It was heavy enough, she hated to admit. Oh, I almost forgot. Father snapped his fingers. I told Lewis, Lewis, his cottage is the fourth one from the baker in Asana, that he could borrow my large stitching needle. Will you stop by the stables on your way out to take it with you? Tell him I'll collect it after the May moon. You won't need it? Ma's brow furrowed. Being late in the season, the commissions from the few neighboring villages for Father's work were trickling into Moan less and less, but there was still a chance to make more coin before the weather turned. It's fine. I have the other two, and that's enough for me. Father winked at Ma. Sloane's chest warmed. Father was a master leather worker. He'd even been commissioned once to make a saddle for a baron. For leagues surrounding Moan, it was said no one was better. As Father's new apprentice these past 2 years, Sloane hoped that someday her work might be as well sought after. You know the needle I speak of and where to find it in the workshop? Father asked. Sloane nodded. Is Lon in the stables right now? She wondered. That was unlikely. It was so early no one had come out of their hovels yet, but Sloane ran a hand along her plait, ensuring her dark hair was still in its tight braid down her back. There was a chance. Ma took Sloane in an embrace. Ma, I'll be back tonight. I know, but Ma's eyes darted around as if expecting danger to appear. Be careful. If your leg does tire, you can sleep in Asana's stable loft tonight. Gundin gave permission, Father said, his hand on Sloane's shoulder. It'll be fine. Sloane's cheeks grew hot. She didn't want to be a burden to anyone. The awareness that Father had surely asked Gundin made even her ears warm. I know you will, but Father trailed off as Ma had. Sloane didn't wait to hear more. How many times had she heard the word but said to her? She bid them goodbye and gave Sherrick a half hug before turning to go. She entered the stable through the back entrance into a tight space where Moan's elder had allowed Father to establish his workshop. No sound came from the front. Lon, the elder's young groom and valet, wasn't feeding the horse yet. 'Tis not like he'd notice you anyway. But mayhap tomorrow at the prodigal moon ritual, the other part of her hoped in vain. When Lon did speak to her, it was in short, awkward spurts, his eyes often downcast at her left leg, slightly smaller than the right and deformed since birth. But mayhap tomorrow. Sloane collected the stitching needle, long, metal, and much thicker than Ma's sewing ones, and was leaving when the elder's horse's neigh made her almost drop it. She couldn't see Ken, the enormous gray stallion was called, but he guessed he was anxious for Lon to come. But she couldn't wait. She needed to go. Ken fussed more as she closed the door behind her. She didn't like that elder's horse. Well, it wasn't that she didn't like it. She feared it, if she was being honest with herself. Lon had had a good laugh the only time she'd attempted to pet it. Ken had startled at her touch, and Sloane lost her balance and fell backward into the hay pile behind her. The elder's last horse, at least, had been a gentle, smaller mare. But the elder had purchased his new horse a year ago when he'd come back from a council meeting up north. Sloane couldn't remember where. When he'd come trotting into Moan, the villagers gawked at the massive animal. How much did that cost? Some had whispered. No one else in the entire village could afford even an old nag. Sloane sometimes wondered about the elder, whom her parents said was adequate but unremarkable. How did he afford a stallion such as that? Nay, she didn't like the elder's horse. As Sloane got closer to the entrance of Moan, there was no gate. She set her eyes on the horizon in front of her, glad it was still early enough that no one was out yet. No longer did anyone mention her leg, something Sloane rarely thought about on her own. After all, she'd turn 18 on the next full moon, the harvest moon, and had lived in Moan all her life, but she was aware of the looks, the half smiles from the few girls in Moan close to her age who'd never quite been able to include her, the kind words from some of the older women that felt a tad too forced, and the way others ignored her at times. When she'd been a child, Sloane had sometimes wondered why she'd even been born. Of course, her parents and other villagers like Mistress Semla, the village tutor, had never treated her differently. Ma always said she was just like everyone else. And more often than not, Sloane knew it was true, but sometimes Sloane still wondered when everyone else would see her. She didn't want to be special like a village elder, one of Dagel's sovereign scholars, or a hero in a song. She just wanted to be seen.